So if you had been following the news coverage of the student protest here in the UK, specifically in London, over tuition fees, that is sort of likely the image that you have gained from this, one of student versus police, brutality and fighting and anarchy. And pretty much I'm here today to tell you why that is a complete and utter bollocks. And I'm not alone here today, I'm actually joined by a guest. It is Mike from my local Atheist Humanist Secular Society. So I shall now hand over to him and he shall lead us into the whole setting of the issue.
So what on earth were we protesting about? Well, before 1997 in this country, higher education was free. There were no tuition fees. In 1997 it was agreed that we should charge £1,000 per year for higher education. That's when tuition fees come in. That was raised to £3,000 in 2003, enacted in 2006, and then in 2010, following the Brown Report, it was agreed that we should raise the tuition fees to £9,000 per year. In short, making it so that a student doing a usual 3-year course pays about £27,000 just in tuition fees, not even taking into account maintenance loans. Now, the Brown Report and subsequent legislation did give students some benefits. We, for instance, don't start paying back our loan until we make £21,000 a year rather than £15,000, and on average we pay back less per month. However, it's a much bigger number and 75% of students aren't going to pay it off. Now, what was the logic behind raising tuition fees, or even starting them? Well, the idea is that you move the cost of education away from the taxpayer onto the student. The problem is, we're not going to pay off our debts, they are simply too big. So what's actually happening is that the taxpayer is still going to be paying our debts anyway. They get wiped after 30 years, it used to be 25, and yet none of us, or very few of us, are actually ever going to reach that, even though we're going into, hopefully, high-paid jobs. And if putting the burden on the taxpayer is somehow so devastating to a country, you have to wonder how Germany, which doesn't have tuition fees anymore, it had a brief experiment with them but no longer has them, somehow produces some of the best institutions in the world.
I mean, to put this in perspective, I'm planning on doing a professional placement year next year, and whilst Mike did a paid placement, I am planning on doing a charity placement. And to do that charity placement, I will be paying £1,000 to work for free. I think that just sort of highlights this issue.
Now, the argument from Nick Clegg, who said he wouldn't raise tuition fees and then got involved in the coalition and agreed to, but that's a story for another time, said that the raise in tuition fees has not deterred students from going to university. And that's true, numbers are still pretty high, and those from less privileged backgrounds are still going to university. One thing would be to say that that's kind of not the point. Just because numbers are still going up does not mean that we are not saddled with debt and that it's not a problem in the future. And the other thing is that increasingly jobs require degrees. Now, this is partly a problem on the side of businesses who are essentially asking for degrees when they don't really need to. I would argue that experience in, say, a business is more important than some business degrees. However, the fact remains that a lot of jobs require you to have degrees, and so university is seen as a necessity. In short, without a degree, you have a very low chance of getting a job. Not impossible, but your options are greatly reduced. Not only that, but there are jobs that do require a degree. Most science jobs will require you to have a degree because you need that much more training.
The protest started absolutely brilliant. Apparently, according to the organisers, up to 10,000 students had turned up, making it the largest student protest since 2010. And we could somewhat believe that. We were in the middle of the crowd and we could not see the end of, the protest on either side. It was quite daunting at one point. But then also I could see between two buildings, I could see on the other side, or the street on the other side of the buildings, that you could see another stream of protesters going past, and then they sort of converged in one spot and then they went off in different ways again. So, we could see that there were a lot of people there and hopefully they all got their voice heard.
The size of the protest is perhaps a little surprising given that the NUS pulled their support for it. They said that the level of risk to students was just unacceptable and that they couldn't support this protest. This is in contrast to Germany, who, in their brief experiment with tuition fees, faced massive opposition from German students' unions. They were leading the opposition. Now, our students' union did, in a way, support us. They reimbursed us for train tickets, but the wider NUS is not offering any support and, in fact, supports tuition fees.
Just to reiterate, it is possible. I mean, Germany can do it, and so can Norway. And Norway can do it not just with their own national students, but international students. Yeah, of course, there's a fee of 1,800 kroner or 3,600 Norwegian kroner, but that only amounts to 180 to 360 British pounds, and that covers exams, the local membership with the union, which gives benefits in travel, in food, etc. So you get quite a bit out of that, and it is a minuscule amount compared to what we in the UK are charged.
So anyway, back to the protests. We were in the middle of it, and it was a very big protest. We couldn't see the beginning or the end of it, which shows the size. And from where we were, there was no violence whatsoever. It was entirely peaceful, the march. We had police officers amongst us and we didn't mind. We even had people cheering on the sides. We had people bibbing their horns in support. So it was a publicly supported, non-violent protest. The only scuffle we saw was when a group took down some barriers to move into Parliament Square, a square which is usually open to the public anyway, so all they really did was reclaim the square for the public. But yes, they did tear down some barriers. Not great. Almost all the cases we've been hearing are of violence or scuffles kicking off after the main march, after we had reached the end point, and after all the talks outside Westminster where representatives from students' unions, representatives from groups, and a few Green Party members spoke to us. They all happened after the main event. And from what I can see of the news footage, they were all carried out by a group which I thought were relatively suspicious looking at the beginning anyway. People who formed a black bloc in black clothing, glasses, masks, whatever. Those seem to be the main perpetrators of the violence. Nothing to do with the majority of the students who did not arrive masked and arrived just there to do a peaceful protest.
And when we say it kicked off, we mean that out of the thousands there, 11 were arrested. That's a tiny, minuscule amount. Around 0.1%. Not even worth registering, really.
So apparently the arrest of 11 people out of 10,000 is enough to say that a protest turned violent. Okay, if you bought a channel package of 1,000 channels for your TV and one of them was porn, you wouldn't say you'd bought a pornographic package. And especially considering that the kind of violence and scuffles we're seeing was quite minor, it's kind of getting a few raunchy music videos and saying it's porn.
I mean, if you had a small village of, say, 10,000 people and 2 or 3 families acted out, you would not suddenly think that that village was in mob rule, that it was complete anarchy. The police clashed with the local citizens when it was only 11 people. It really does show the hypocrisy.
You could fit pretty much everyone who got arrested into the back of a small van. As far as we know, most of those people have been released without charge. As far as we know, only one person has been brought back for further investigation. They've been brought to court.
I mean, we've had this before with mods and rockers and the way that media portrayed them, and they sort of blew things out of proportion. A few deck chairs were thrown, a few places were vandalised, and suddenly, oh my god, it's the end of the world, they're all vermin sort of thing. Here actually we had a message, and it was a very good message, I feel, and we were peaceful for the most of the thing. 11 people got arrested, and suddenly that was taken out of context, and you lose the message. It's just blurted out by violent protesters. Look at these people, the protester throwing the brick sort of mentality, and it really just makes me sad. It really loses sight of why we were there. The majority of the people there were peaceful. And we're not talking about, 95%. We're on about 99.9% were peaceful. Quite literally. So really, that does just show the way the media has taken it and spun it and ignored the actual issue at hand, which are broken promises and ensuring the future of our young people in making them have access to education that won't crush their future in unpayable debt. So yeah, that's really all we have to say. I'll link to Mike's channel. I'll actually link to one of his videos, so you can give his channel a check out. There's also the footage that we gathered from the protest there, so be sure to go check that out as well. This is Essence of Forge, hoping you've done well. Take care and out.